Mahalo nui to those who have come before me. I stand on the shoulders of many, many kupuna, aunties and uncles, youth who have contributed to this program, and I'm standing here today because of all of their hard work. So I wanted to mahalo them as well as you for this opportunity. So the program main focus or mission is to enhance the nearshore resources. So we do this by linking volunteers and community members with aquatic resource managers as well as enforcement officers. And this relationship helps to steward our resources, our nearshore resources, as well as steward the area. So I put this picture up here because if you can see, there's a local in here who's just providing information. He's a local in the area, but he knows about this rip in the area and he's providing safety information. So it's about stewarding your area as well as your resources. So the Makai Watch program is made up of two components. We have the awareness raising and outreach, which is basically going on and educating people about the resources. If there's a management area, what is this management area? Why do we have it? And then observation and incident reporting. So this is being able to effectively take down license plate numbers, descriptions, so that you can turn in a report that DoCare can then follow up on and either cite or provide outreach and education to those folks. We also have this optional human use and biological monitoring component, and the reasons why it's optional is because trying to create a standardized state program, everything needs to be standard across the board, but each Makai Watch community monitors differently. So folks down in Ho'okena are looking at manini and kole, whereas in Ha'ena, they're looking at moe and mullet, so it's different what they look for. So because you couldn't monitor statewide straight across the board, we're like, this is an optional component. It's still important because when you're diving in the water and looking at your resources and you talk to people, it's a first-hand experience. You're like, yeah, you know, I see what's happening with the coral. I see our fish coming back. When you're doing human use surveys, so going out and checking what are people doing in there? Are they operations, are there commercial operations, kayaking, fishing, people just snorkeling? What's going on out there? You get a baseline of what's happening. So when you start to do observation and incident reporting, you already know what's happening in there. You have knowledge like, hey, this isn't supposed to be happening. It kind of red flags it for you. So benefits of a Makai Watch program. Effective stewardship. So you get to work hand in hand with enforcement officers as well as aquatic resource managers. And then you improve those relationships and just get to know them more on a personal level, know what they're doing, like why they're involved in this kind of work. You get trained volunteers. So we provide training to our volunteers in the area about effectively reporting violations as well as providing outreach. Outreach event and support. So whenever you have like an outreach event in the Makai Watch areas, they call up DLNR and be like, hey, can you come and support us, set up a booth there and just provide what's happening for our community. And the last but not least is DLNR endorsement. So there's been a lot of different communities who are like, we're Makai Watch, we're Makai Watch. But DLNR officially, or we're officially trying to work with 8 communities right now. And as part of this effort, we provide letters of support. So if they want to go for a grant, we'll provide letters of support saying that this is an official Makai Watch program and we support them. So statewide, we have 8 communities right now. We have Hanalea and Ha'ena on Kauai, Pupukea and Mauna Lua on Oahu, Ka'ehu and Ka'anapali on Maui, and Pu'ako and Ka'upulehu on Hawaii Island. So this Makai Watch program is guided by an advisory group. So on the advisory group, there's the Department of Land and Natural Resources chair. We have the Division of Aquatic Resources. We have the Division of Conservation and Resources Enforcement, and we have the Hawaiian Island Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary. Partners who help us advise is KUA, or Kua'aina Ulu Awamo, the Nature Conservancy, Hawaii Wildlife Fund, and the Coral Reef Alliance. And then our funders are Conservation International and the Harold Castle Foundation. And this is just a visual of kind of like what it looks like. So you have the advisory group who I liaison between them and the Makai Watch communities. And then each Makai Watch community has a coordinator that interacts and works with their volunteers in the area. And if you guys have any questions, just ask. Okay, so because it's a state program, there's a lot of legal liabilities we have to be in check with. So one is organizational representation. This is very important because before DLNR had money, tried to give it to Makai Watch communities, but because not all of them were sponsored by a nonprofit that could accept money, they couldn't accept it. So moving forward, all Makai Watch communities have an organizational representation that can conduct business in Hawaii so that they can apply for grants as well as receive funds. Program support, so being able to write grants and get funding for your site, and then evaluating the process that's happening. So every 6 months, we're going to be evaluating how is this working? Is there things not working with communication? Is there fundings not working? Like, how can we help and just keep this connection going? Each Makai Watch site has a program coordinator. So there's a site coordinator there that coordinates the volunteers and then compiles that so that it comes up to the state in more of a orderly fashion than like haphazard from all the different volunteers. Each Makai Watch community, we're asking to put in 20 hours per month, and this is either outreach and education or doing observation incident reporting. Management of volunteers, so making sure each volunteer has to fill out an application because it is a state program. And then they all will be trained in observation and incident reporting and our Ikekai curriculum, which is the education outreach component. Whoa. Cool. So another thing is we'll have site program volunteer manuals so that they can read up on what the cultural history is, what's the traditional practices in there, as well as have a quick reference guide so that it's a 2-pager they can walk around with them and be like, oh yeah, right here's the rule, and show it to people and kind of talk story and engage with folks like that. So making sure they coordinate with DLNR, either for violation reports or for chances to help go and provide education outreach opportunities. And last but not least, record keeping. So because it's a state program, there's safety protocols. So we tell them no offensive action, do not confront, don't debate or argue with people, don't provide your personal information because you don't want an unexpected visitor at your house later. Be aware of what's happening, not only with the environment, but with the people around there. Always travel with a buddy, have a phone. The phone thing, we've been learning, like some places in some of our communities, no more phone reception. So making sure volunteers know, hey, if you're in this area, you got to get to this point in order for make one call emergency. If you have to call police, please do 911. Photography, so when you're taking pictures, we let the folks know, if you want to use it in a violation case, do not spread it everywhere. It belongs going through a certain procedure, and DoCare will work that procedure for them, as well as with social media. So no Facebooking and putting stuff up there. We're going to train the volunteers that this is the proper protocol that we do with this type of stuff. And then just being familiar with applicable laws, rules, and regulations. So how does it look? What does it look like? We've been able to start figuring this out. So Makai Watch volunteers out, they see an incident or a violation, they call 643 DLNR. So that's one way to get it to DoCare. And then the site coordinator records it on their monthly log, and this is like, hey, this was one of the phone calls, or this is one of the violations. And then I keep track of it too, because they'll be like, hey, Luna, this is our monthly log, and this is what we have. So once it gets to the DoCare branch chief supervisor, they'll assign it to an officer. And the officer will conduct their investigation. And once they're powered with the investigation, they can report it back to the volunteer, myself, and I can, it just works that way. So that's how it's supposed to work. We've had some examples of it working in the field. And the community is happy because at least they're, like, a lot of the time they're wondering what's happening. And now they're at least understanding this is what's happening with their cases. And we've had a few instances where folks have been cited in our Makai Watch communities, and DoCare branch chief has emailed our Makai Watch site coordinator saying, hey, this would happen over here. These are the citations that happen. So there's this communication that's starting to work. So we're having some success.
No.
Yes.
I have a question. What determines a Makai Watch site, or how do you pick a site?
Okay, so these sites have been, there was a bunch of sites that came about, but these sites were chosen through a Makai Watch strategies, through all these different communities came together and needed to standardize the Makai Watch program. And there was different communities at all different levels. So they were like, this is what the Makai Watch community model looks like now. And this is kind of after the strategy, this is what it looks like presently. So it changed from like a 3-component to a 2-component with an optional monitoring. So after that, communities were like, well, we were just interested in the monitoring component. So places like Ho'okena, who were like started off monitoring, they're just like, you know, we want to stick with that monitoring, so we're not going to move forward into the present situation. So we just was working with different Makai Watches, and as the program kind of formed, those Makai Watches that wanted to conform to it stuck with it. As a way, so when I first came on board, that was a question like, oh, Makai Watch is changing. So I brought that to the attention of the advisory group, being like, hey, you know, the community are saying it's changing and we're being exclusive. So how do we be inclusive? So we said, they explained to me why we have to make the monitoring optional. Because I understood, like, that was where I started with Ho'okena. Like, we were monitoring, and that's how our Makai Watch was. But moving forward, it's like we wanted to work with enforcement and start to get enforcement involved a lot more. And they were just like, we want to focus on monitoring. So each community kind of moved forward, and now we have these 8 that are in this. It's kind of like a pilot program right now that we've been running for the last year with me.
So if you wanted another community to be actively involved, you would have to go to the advisory committee first.
So there is an application. There's an application for that. As of right now, DoCare's capacity is 2 per island. So we're just trying to like pilot these 2 communities per island right now and move forward with it.
How long do you monitor?
What do you mean?
Is it done daily, weekly, monthly?
It depends.
6 months, quarterly?
So we evaluate every 6 months. Every month they'll turn an evaluation or a report of this is how many hours we put in. So it depends on the volunteers and their area, what they do with their, when did they go? Did they go on the weekends at like an outreach event? So like Pupukea on Saturdays, every Saturday, 4 hours, they're out there. So their volunteers go to those. Some, like in Ka'anapali, they go and walk after work. So then they'll go either before work or after work. So it just depends on the volunteers and when they're doing their observation and monitoring.
Okay, thank you.
Did that answer? Okay. So what's happening now? So we're implementing the strategy. One of the things we're doing is trying to get the communities compliant with all of these standards, because once they're compliant with these standards, they're gonna be eligible for a memorandum of agreement with both the Division of Conservation and Resource Enforcement as well as the Division of Aquatic Resources. One of the standards or one of those compliance is the volunteer manual. So we've sent out templates. So they're starting to find out what are the mo'olelos in their area, what are the traditional practices, what are the regulations in their area, and they're building their volunteer manuals. We just had a Makai Watch workshop for the state. So this was a meeting where each of the Makai Watch communities brought their top 3 concerns. Those concerns were distributed to the island branch chiefs, and they provided responses, and everybody was kind of on the same page. And then we met. So when we met, it was so much easier because everybody already knew what was the dialogue, and we came up with a couple of next steps, solutions to those issues and concerns. We also have 2 pilot projects, and this is how we've been figuring out this enforcement chain. One of them is in Mauna Lua, and the other is in Kahana. So these pilot projects were started for DoCare to assess their follow-up and response to violation reports being called into the department. And then we're coming up with our community training, so both the DoCare reporting and the Ikekai curriculum. Ikekai, for those of you who don't know, is like Ike is knowledge, but we're playing off of like going like Holo Ikekai, going to the beach. But when you go to the beach, there's this Ike that you want to know about. It's not just going to the beach for gold. You want to know like, what is my fish doing? What is the coral doing? How come get this kind of limu out there? So that's where we're going with this Ikekai curriculum. Some of the lessons learned. So follow up with violation reports. Communities love when they know what's going on. Having good agency communications, both within DLNR, so the different divisions, as well as within an agency and the region and the area, so like in Ka'anapali. Community structure, you have small communities, it's more family conflicts, it's more traditional practices in the area. When you start to go to bigger communities, it's more agency conflicts and then more corporate commercial activities there. Program, it needs to be unique to the place, but it also needs to be standardized across the state. So it's a balance in between there. And the process needs to be transparent and inclusive, as well as able to adapt to different situations in the environment. Support and collaboration has been key. So we've been partnering with Division of Boating, Division of Aquatic Resources, state parks for different communities, depending on what the issues and concerns are. So having key government and community leaders, having coordinators for the program, having government and nonprofit support, community engagement, really important. So Makai Watch is just one tool that the DLNR has to engage with communities. It's just one of the tools and options. The other two that we know of is community-based subsistence fishing areas and the Ahomoku. And then collaborating with the Community's Fisheries Enforcement Unit. So this is a model that DoCare is piloting on Maui and is what they want to put out as a future enforcement model. And what they have done is implement a Makai Watch along with this enforcement model because they believe in this program and understand that it works. And this is one thing that they want to incorporate in their future model for enforcement. And last but not least, education. Education, education. Important. Okay, Paul.